Good afternoon, Algebra 2 students. I hope your day is going well. A little video for you while I am absent for today's track meet. So on the slide you can see here, and you've got this on your handout as well, you can go ahead and check your homework answers from yesterday. So take a look at those. Pause the video if you need to, if you want to go through some. If you have any questions over any of these problems, I would encourage you to ask Miss Ullery, or just put a star or circle by them, and you can ask me when I return tomorrow. All right. Today we're going to talk about some more about simplifying and then multiplying and dividing with our rational expressions. All right. And so we're just going to jump right into it today. We got a little bit of practice with this yesterday. So we're just going to kind of take the next step with it. So you should have a note sheet right in front of you, so you can follow along as I complete each of these example problems. Pause the video as you need to, rewind and rewatch as you need to, but I highly encourage you to take some good notes as we work our way through this. All right. So the first thing that I want to remind you of, yesterday we did some simplifying, but things were kind of already factored for us. And so today we would just want to recognize that sometimes we're going to have to factor before we can simplify. All right. So you can see this is an example of a rational expression, right? Rational expression is just simply something that can be represented as a fraction, and that's what we have here. So the first thing that we're going to do is that we need to actually factor each, excuse me here. Sorry about that. I hit the wrong thing. But you are actually going to factor each item before we start the simplification process. So let's go ahead and do that. All right. Now I'm going to start right at the beginning. I'm going to completely factor this. Now you may not do this every single time, but I just want you to see this as we go to simplify down. So even when I look at 4x cubed, all right, I'm going to look at 4 and 12, and I know that both of those numbers are divisible by 4. So I'm going to write them so that they have factors involving 4. So let's start out in our numerator. So I'm going to write this as 4, and then we've got x cubed, right? Well, I'm going to write this as x times x times x. All right, again, I'm going to completely factor it. And you may not do this every single time, but I like to do this just so you can see how it works, all right? And then we're going to go ahead and factor our trinomial. So we did some work with this yesterday. So just a little reminder here, as I take a look at this problem, I know that because I have a subtraction sign in that first term, that when I look at my factors back here, one has to be negative and one has to be positive. So I'm thinking about, okay, what are two numbers that add to give us 8? Or excuse me, multiply to give us 8, but add to give us 7. So I know that's going to be the factor, hey, x minus 8. I know the larger factor has to be negative, since I have the negative sign here. And then x plus 1, right? One factor is positive, one factor is negative. All right, and so that is our numerator completely factored. Now let's completely factor the denominator. All right, so when I look at 12, I'm going to write this as 3 times 4. All right, I want to be able to see those factors. Then we have an x, and now we need to completely factor our denominator. So we're going to look at that binomial term. Hopefully we take a look at this and remember, hey, that's a difference of squares, right? So we can factor that into x minus 8 and x plus 8. All right, 8 times 8 is 64. And then the 8s are going to cancel out, making it that difference of squares. All right. Excuse me. So now we have this completely factored. And so what we can do next then is we can go ahead and let's just cancel out terms. We're going to simplify this, right? So we're going to cancel out terms that are common in the numerator and the denominator. So right off the bat, we have these 4s. So those are going to cancel out. All right, one of these x's is going to cancel out. All right, x is kind of hard to see, so we're just going to scribble it out here. All right, so those x's are gone. All right, then I have x minus 8 and x minus 8. So those are going to cancel each other out. All right, And now we want to simplify. So once we do our canceling, now we can just kind of simplify things down, right? So x times x in my numerator is x squared. And then we're going to multiply that times x plus 1. And we don't actually have to multiply it out. We can leave it as it is there. This is going to be divided by, what do I have left in my denominator? Well, I have a 3 and an x plus 8. And that is our simplified answer. All right? And so factoring, which is why we reviewed yesterday, is going to be critically important to your work today. And you're going to see that as we continue on. All right? So that's kind of simplifying, just factoring and canceling things out. So let's kind of expand that. What we want to focus on today as well is we want to talk about multiplication and division with rational expressions. So let's take a look at an example problem there. All right, so I've got some steps down off to the side here, and so you can just follow these steps. That's what I'm going to do as I work through this problem. And so let's kind of take a look. All right, now notice our steps here. Step number 1 is we're going to factor, right? Now essentially see this, right? We're going to see all of this as being in the numerator, right? Because it's multiplication, we know we just multiply across, and we're going to see all of this as being in the denominator, all right? So it really kind of looks exactly like the last problem that we did. We just have that multiplication sign in there, but it's really not going to change things for us. So let's go ahead and factor first, all right? So if I start with my first term, let's start with this x squared plus 3x, all right? Now I know that both of those terms have an x, so I'm going to go ahead and factor out that x. So that's going to leave me with x times the quantity x plus 3. Now x minus 7, there's not really anything I can do there, so I'm just going to write it as x minus 7. And notice I'm going to go ahead and just write it right next to my factors from my first fraction. Because it's multiplication, again, we just multiply across the top, multiply across the bottom, so that's essentially what I'm representing here, all right? And now we'll go ahead and divide. X plus 3, there's nothing I can do to factor there, so I'm just going to write that in parentheses. And I'm okay with not being able to factor that because as I look ahead, I know those are going to cancel out. Then I look at x squared minus 49. Again, that's a difference of squares, so I know that's going to be x minus 7 and x plus 7. And as we're doing this work, you should kind of look ahead and say, okay, what do my numerator and denominator have in common? So like even when you're factoring this x squared minus 49, if you're like, is that a difference of squares? Yeah, it is. Hey, that's a good thing because that x minus 7 is going to cancel out, all right? So now let's go ahead and cancel our common factors in the numerator and the denominator. So these x plus 3's are gone. X minus 7, gone. All right, and now we just write what we have left, okay? Now, one problem I want to point out here is very common for students to maybe cancel out the x's, but remember that x plus 7 is in parentheses, and we can't cancel across addition. We can only cancel across multiplication, which is why we can cancel out these factors over here, all right? So all that we're left with then is just simply x divided by x plus 7. And there is our simplified work, okay? So again, very, very similar to the simplifying problem before. We're really not going to let multiplication really change things for us. We're still going to factor. We're going to cancel our common factors, and we're going to simplify and be done, all right? So let's do a couple more of those just for good practice, all right? So let's start with this one. A little different variable here. Might look a little bit more involved, but again, we're just going to factor. So let's start out with the a squared plus 4a. All right, if I factor there, I take a look and see, okay, I have an a in both terms, so I'm going to go ahead and factor that out. So that's going to leave me a plus 4. All right, again, let's work across our whole top. So then I get over here to a squared minus a minus 2. Again, I'm going to look and see that the sign is negative. And in front and negative in the back. So because it's negative in the back, I know that they have to have opposite signs in my factors. And I know that the larger factor needs to be negative to give me that negative sign in front. So think of this as 1a. So I need numbers that multiply to give me 2 but add to give me 1. So that's going to be a negative 2 and then a plus 1. Okay. And now let's continue on. Let's go to our denominator now. So again, we're going to completely factor. So I look at a squared minus 6a plus 8. So as I take a look at that, I have common terms here. I have 8 that's positive, but my middle term is, or my first term is negative. My middle term is negative. So I need both of these factors are going to have to be negative in order to give me a negative 6. So what are numbers that multiply to give me 8 and add to give me 6? Well, that would be 4 and 2, right? But they are going to be negative. So it's a minus 4 and a minus 2. Okay. Now let's come over to our last part of our fraction here. Okay. And if I take a look here, I can factor out a 3a squared, right? And again, I'm going to completely factor that. So I'm going to write that as a times a instead of a squared. And I just like to do that so that we can visually see what happens when we cancel and what we have left. All right, now we took out a 3a squared, so that means all I have left here is a plus, and then I took the a squared out, so 12 divided by 3 would give me 4. Okay, so this will be my complete factorization. So now let's go ahead and cancel common terms. So I'm going to start with this a out front. Right? Well, this a in the numerator will cancel with one of the a's in the denominator. This a plus 4 can cancel with this a plus 4. My a minus 2 cancels with my a minus 2. And then I have this a plus 1, which I don't have anything left there to cancel. So let's go ahead and just write what we have left then. So this is going to be equal to my numerator. All I'm left with is a plus 1. And in my denominator, I have this 3a hanging out back here. So I'm going to go ahead and write that in the front. And then I have a minus 4. And that is as simple as we can get. So there is our simplification process. So again, hopefully as you notice as we walk through these problems, your ability to factor is going to be extremely important, and that's going to help a ton. All right, let's talk division now. Division is really pretty simple because if we think about division, division is really just a multiplication problem, right? If I'm taking a fraction divided by a fraction, I'm really just going to multiply by the reciprocal. So you can see in our steps here that that's really our first step. Is I'm just going to rewrite this as a multiplication problem. So I'm going to leave my first fraction alone. So I have x squared minus 8x plus 16 divided by x minus 4. So I'm going to leave that alone. But now I want to turn this division into multiplication. And when I do that, that means that this fraction gets flipped, right? So instead of being x minus 4 over x plus 3, I'm going to write it as x plus 3 over x minus 4. All right, so we're going to start, again, by rewriting it as a multiplication problem. Once we have it rewritten as a multiplication problem, well, now I can just go ahead and do the exact same steps that I did before. So let's go ahead and factor. So I'll start with my numerator over here. I've got x squared minus 8x plus 16. So I need factors of 16 that are going to add to give me 8. Because this is a negative sign, I know both those factors are going to be negative. So those factors would be 4 and 4. So x minus 4, x minus 4. Right? And then we just have x plus 3, which is already a factor, so nothing that we need to do there. This is all going to be divided by x minus 4, x minus 4. And so again, now we go ahead, cancel out common factors. So this x minus 4 and this x minus 4 cancel, this x minus 4 and this x minus 4 cancel, and all I am left with is x plus 3 in the numerator. I could put this over 1, but that's not necessary. So there is my simplified problem. All right. So again, division and multiplication are pretty much the same. Okay. The only thing we have to do in that division problem is we need to rewrite it as multiplication first, then go ahead, factor, cancel, simplify. All right. Let's do one more just for practice sake, and then we'll cut it loose. All right. So again, the first thing that I want to do is I want to rewrite this as a multiplication problem. And just to show you how we can expedite this process, I'm going to go ahead and factor as I do that. And so I'm going to start out with my first numerator here, my first fraction. So I need numbers that multiply to give me 28 and add to give me 11. All right. So I know those numbers would be 7 and 4. So I'm going to have b plus 7 and, oops, not an x, b plus 4. All right, now I'm going to just go ahead and extend this here. All right, now as I look ahead, let's go ahead and factor down here first. So then I have a difference of squares. So b squared minus 16 is going to be b minus 4 and b plus 4. And now again, this division we want to turn into multiplication. So that means I'm going to flip this second fraction. So that means I end up with a b minus 7 on the top and a b plus 7 on the bottom. And now let's go ahead and cancel things that are common in the numerator and denominator. So my b plus 7, I have a common factor there in the top and the bottom. My b plus 4, and I do not have a factor of b minus 7 in the denominator. So now let's just simplify it. So we just simply have b minus 7 divided by b minus 4. And there is our final answer. All right. So again, factoring is going to be critically important today. So be careful. Take your time as you factor. But all your problems should be relatively easy. I'm not going to stick you with any leading coefficients today. All right, well, that is your examples. Here is your homework assignment for today out of that worksheet packet that you got yesterday. So you guys have a great day, and I will see you tomorrow.